Hello and welcome to part one of, I believe, 6 videos that I'm going to be making on how I do Raids 3, known as Tombs of a Masket. I am relatively newer. I guess now I'm in the middle stages of PVMing. I'm slowly getting into it, and I wanted to show you here on this video in particular is my gear, the stats that I have, and the invocations that I run. And a little bit of swapping around invocations if you're interested in swapping things around. So real quick, those are my stats. Not max combat, as you can see. My highest skills I have are my melees at 91 and 90. At the start of the ToA release, I was at base 90 melees. I was at like 85 range and 80 mage. This is relatively low stats, and I would recommend base 90s. I got lucky with my weapon here, the not the Karis Parson, the Osmanthon's Fang, which really hits really hard. So I tend to invest a lot of my money and resources into my melee gear. Speaking of gear, what I have equipped is Bandel's top and bottom. I recommend if you're learning the Serpentine Helm, so you don't have to worry about bringing any anti-venoms or things of that nature. Brimstone ring, primordial boots, barrels gloves, which is a good glove for all 3 styles, and I don't even own any of the gloves for the upgrades of the other 3 styles. Fire cape for the melee side, amulet of torture, ruby dragon bolts E. I will be using a dragon crossbow, as we see here in my inventory. So for my mage switch, it's going to be Aram's top and bottom, occult necklace, and Trident of the Swamp. No boot switches, no glove switches, no offhand switch for it. My mage is at level 81, and I do struggle with that point, but luckily mage isn't really used too much unless you have the staff, and the staff itself slaps throughout the raid. For range, I use Carol top and bottom because it's relatively good in mage defense, so it gives me a little protection in that department. The necklace of anguish, which is necessary. You're gonna need the necklace switches for each combat style. I run the dragon crossbow with those ruby dragon bolts E. Occasionally, if you're lucky, you'll get that proc on the bosses and do 100 damage. It helps a lot with Zebek. Special attack weapons, I have Osmanthon's Fang, Dragon Dagger, and Bandel's Godsword. So, I did not start doing raids with the Osmanthon's Fang. I actually started using the Dragon Hunter Lance. It was relatively cheap. After rummaging around YouTube and other guides, Hasta is better because I think it gives you an extra like 5 strength bonus or something like that. I don't remember on the top of my head, but that's how I started. So like if I remember, I'll show a picture on the screen of me getting this drop in particular, the Osmanthon's Fang. Instead of selling it at the time, which was worth like 330 mil, I just decided to keep it and use it. It did drop a lot in price right now, but honestly it does not matter to me. I do plan on keeping this weapon for a very long time because it is so useful during the raid. And then again, to note, I forgot to mention the Ava's, the cape slot for range. I have not done Dragon Slayer 2. I will get around to it eventually, but that is a must. I lose so much GP with losing all those bolts. You'll have a higher chance of saving more bolts with that higher backpack for the range. Minimal switches, it's a good chunk. I kind of wish I was better at doing more switches and I could bring more things. And as for like supplies that I bring in, right before I go in, I do pre-pot. So I take a sip of the super combat, the super ranging potion, and a stamina. I do not own an imbued heart for the magic. I should get one as soon as I have enough money to, and it'll help a lot with the pre-pot. You bank all those 4 and then get a fresh super combat and ranging potion. When you first start out, you might want to bring more Ceridome and Brews, but I've gotten to the comfortable stage where I should only bring in 6 and I'll be very comfortable. I do camp my prayers, piety, rigor, and augury as much as I can. Being at only 78 prayer, I tend to lose out points very fast. So I bring in a bit more restores for the first two bosses than I do. It is possible to do the raid at 150, and I'll show you my invocations that I use. Going from top to bottom, I have the hardcore run, which means you only have one life. So if you die once, that's a wipe. On a diet, which makes it so you cannot use food. And as you see in my setup, I don't even bring food. So that's a free 15 points. Kefri, the bug Elite 4, I'm just calling them the Elite 4, is one of my favorites, and I think the boss fight, not the puzzle room, but the boss fight, especially with my my Osmundson's Fang. So I have Living Larvae, Overlords, Blowing Mud, and Aerial Assault. So noteworthy thing about this is that for this room, you may want to bring the Kara's Partisan if you don't have the Osmundson's Fang or the Rapier, Garazi's Rapier, because that weapon does a little more accurate towards the boss and the little minions that it spawns. This invocation in particular, Aerial Assault, when he throws the bombs at you, it's a one square bomb. This changes it to a 3x3. People really don't like that, but I find it very easy to dodge, which I'll show in a later video. For Zabek, I only have one on. Honestly, I could probably turn on a couple, which is where he knows blood magic. He'll occasionally offer you, and he'll spawn a blood orb that'll chase you around. Blood Thinner is also a common one that people use. It's a free 5 points. Instead of one giant ball, it's 3 little ones, but they're easy to dodge, not too much of an issue. For Akka, I have no invocations on. Reason being, most of my wipes do come from this room. Again, my switches are bad. My stats aren't the greatest. So with my low magic, I'm not doing a lot of magic damage. I get lucky occasionally with the ruby specs that are proccing, do a good amount of damage, and my melee is really good for it. But if I were to turn one on, I would have Feeling Special. When it does its little Simon Says special attack, it's just slightly more faster. With servers and ping being not too great lately, it's not really that worth doing because you might get caught in it. It's unfortunate. All right, and now for Baba, I do have a couple here. Mind the Gap, which a lot of people do not like, so you can always turn that off if you need to. Jungle Japes is where they drop the bananas on the floor. It's pretty free, easy to avoid, not too much of a problem. And Shaking Things Up is where it does that little shadow attack and you have to run in diagonal. You just have to run a little further. And again, I'll go into more detail in future videos. And then for the Warden, I have 3 separate invocations up. Penetration during phase 2. The Warden's obelisk attacks will be significantly more potent in the second phase of the fight. Increase raid level by 10. So occasionally during the phase 2 fight, it'll shoot out little special attacks, aerial effects. If you don't dodge them properly, they do a little more damage, and I believe it drops your prayer. And I think I've noticed that. Once you get the hang of it, you can probably turn this one on. And I have Overclock and Overclock 2. Total 20 points for the 2. It just makes the phase 3 fight, the little tile area of effect damage, more faster. So you just have to take your time with it and focus more on movement than anything else. Now, things that you can do when starting out, I would recommend Softcore Run here. Allows you to die 3 times before you wipe, which should be a really good practice tool for you. If you're okay with the bosses and if you have higher stats, I would recommend Walk the Path. I've been running this here and there just to challenge myself. What Walk the Path does is that once you finish one of the Elite 4, there's a chance that one of the other bosses that you have not done yet, chance to level up by 1, which means they have, I believe, a little more HP and do a little more damage But once it hits to level 2, you have a slight extra mechanic added to the fight. I actually don't mind it. When I first started doing 150s, I had walked the path, and it was really it wasn't too much of a problem. You just had to keep an eye on which path that you dislike. Like for me, Akka, I had a problem with, so I would make sure to do Akka when it was at 0 level ups. Again, Zebek, Blood Thinner, people use a lot, and those would be my recommendations for doing normals or making your way to doing normals. This is what I do. If you're coming from entry mode at level 0, I would start with doing it with less death. Try to make your way to softcore run. That's probably the deepest I'll go, because as you add more invocations, the fights do get harder. On a diet, then you won't need to bring any more food. And then focus on your favorite boss, your favorite of the Elite Four. Let's say you really love doing Baba. Maybe eventually you can have all the Baba ones on. Or maybe you really like Akka and you have high stats. And you have great ping on servers on your end. You know, and so it's all those mix and match. So if you really like one of the Elite Fours, really get into it. That's what I did with Kefri. I have a majority of the invocations for Kefri on. Well, thank you very much for watching. This is going to be part 1 of a few videos. Please subscribe, because I will be posting the other videos later. So leave a comment of the invocations that you guys like to use. And thank you very much for watching.